are these people?
The next outlet and people I want to talk about are the people over at Declassified UK, who've also done some phenomenal work. They're actually Indie Media Award honorees. For those who don't know, we actually created a whole website called the Indie Media Awards over at Substack that kind of showcases who we found to be the most consistent and anti-Zionist and anti-imperialist outlets and live streamers and journalists over the last several years. And one of the first outlets we chose, and we, in the first class, was Declassified UK. All their links to be able to support them are there. You can find them right there. And that's all this is just a page dedicated to how you can find them and that they're great. And those are illustrations by Zago Brothers. So shout out to Lucio Zago. So they've been publishing quite a few stories lately, and I thought had impact. One of them was this one from John McEvoy, who's one of the top editors over there now. And he writes that we obtained a list of Israelis who received military training in Britain. Many of them are now directing operations in Gaza amid the genocide, and now Declassified publishes the list for the first time. And again, this is John McEvoy over at Declassified, and the list is over here. At least 32 Israeli officers trained at RCDS, including numerous senior figures. Then you've got 6 Israeli soldiers also trained at the UK Military College in Oxfordshire, and as many as 4 Israeli soldiers are still training in Britain despite the ban. Well, that's apparently now changed, and they're no longer training there. That's one of the things that's happened as a result. So that's one thing that I wanted to point out. So go read this short article over at Declassified UK. All right, Britain trained Israeli soldiers fighting in Gaza. Declassifieduk.org is their website. And all of these links, by the way, will be in the Substack article dedicated to this episode over at indiemediatoday.com after the episode's over. I also wanted to bring this video from John McEvoy because he testified at the Gaza Tribunal. And I mentioned the Gaza Tribunal a couple of times. They've done this a few times. And I am a big proponent of having a tribunal-style Nuremberg trial. And the way that gets started is with something like this, where you lay out the template for what that's going to look like. So John says, last week I testified at the Gaza Tribunal about how Israeli soldiers have been training in Britain throughout the genocide. The Telegraph now reports that Israelis have been barred for training in the UK. So here's his testimony. It's 2.5 minutes long. I wanted to play this, and hopefully Reef can hear this.
I now want to turn to Israeli military officers training in Britain throughout the genocide. After months of stonewalling from both Conservative and Labour governments, we discovered that Israeli army officers have been allowed to train in Britain since October 2023. This information was provided to us earlier this year in response to a Freedom of Information request after several refusals through the Freedom of Information Act. The Ministry of Defence said that fewer than 5 Israeli officers had trained at the prestigious Royal College of Defence Studies in 2023 and 2024. But we subsequently found that at least one of those Israeli soldiers graduated from the RCDS just last month. So even as recently as last month, the UK is training soldiers from an army that is actively committing genocide. And it's not just Israeli soldiers training in Britain. The UK government has welcomed several high-ranking Israeli officers to Britain since October 2023, often providing them with special diplomatic immunity to protect them from private arrest applications under universal jurisdiction legislation. That list includes, but may extend, because all of these visits were intended to occur in secrecy. So there may be many other Israeli military officers that have visited, but the list includes Lieutenant General Herzi Halevi, the IDF's then Chief of the General Staff, who had been directing the Israeli military's operations throughout the Gaza genocide. He visited Britain in November 2024 and the Foreign Office provided him with special diplomatic immunity, protecting him from arrest for war crimes. Then there was Major General Oded Basiuk, head of the Israeli military's operations directorate, who was overseeing Gaza operations as well. He attempted to secretly visit Britain in January 2025, but Declassified managed to doorstep him outside Russia in London. And most recently, there was Major General Tomer Bar, the commander of the Israeli Air Force, which has been overseeing, the key player in the decimation of Gaza. Bar was subsequently identified in the chain of command of Israeli officers responsible for the killing of 5 Al Jazeera journalists in Gaza last month. He was allowed to visit Britain in July 2025, just 2 months ago.
And apparently now they're starting to say, well, we're not going to allow that anymore. So a little bit of closing the barn door after the horse already got out, sure. But they are closing that barn door. And it is somewhat symbolic, at least, that they're doing that. So shout out and, good on John for doing that and testifying and bringing light to all the times that Britain has willingly brought Israeli war criminals, known war criminals, for training in the UK. It's crazy. And then there's this other story.
Yep.
Now, remember last year, I subbed in for Colin last summer on INN News, and we talked about a weapons expo in London. Remember that?
Mm-hmm.
It was one of my
Farm
favorites.
remembers.
It was one of my favorites. Well, apparently they had this the following year's version, and this year Phil from Declassified tried to get back in, and they kind of recognized who he was and were like, "Nah, I don't think we're gonna let you in." So Declassified barred from London Arms Fair as Israeli weapons dealers arrive. Because last year they asked, are these going to be used in Gaza? They would literally walk up to weapons contractors and people that were kind of showcasing a certain weapon and ask, are these going to be used in Gaza? How many kids are you planning on killing with that? And they got thrown out pretty quickly. And all I can say was, how the hell did they get into it in the first place? But good on them for doing it and getting the footage. I remember Max Blumenthal trying to do the same thing to an expo here in DC, but these guys were the first to try to do it. And now we've got a major arms fair has been criticized by press freedom groups for refusing to let Declassified enter the event, being held for the first time since Labor took power. Okay, the biennial. Okay, so it was 2 years ago already we did that? Wow. Defense and Security Equipment International's trade show is hosting over 50 Israeli companies this week at London's sprawling Excel Center, despite canceling plans for an Israeli government pavilion. Jesus. Wow. Just taking over. Just genocide airs everywhere. Exhibitors include Rafael, a missile manufacturer wholly owned by the Israeli state, and private weapons firm Elbit, we know them very well, which supplies 85% of the drones used in Gaza. It marks the first time Declassified has been denied media accreditation, having attended the last 2 DSEI events. Those took place under conservative governments in 23 and back in 21, when we questioned defense ministers about arms sales to Saudi Arabia. Reporters Without Borders, who we have our own issues with, said that the decision to block Declassified this year was worrying, anti-democratic, and suggests there's something to hide. You think?
You think?
Talk about the mother of all understatements. And I don't know if that's Rebecca herself, Rebecca Vincent, or someone else from Reporters Not Borders making that statement. Then when Declassified was allowed to enter DSEI in 2021, event spokesman General Rowdy Roddy Porter, he wasn't really rowdy, claimed that, quote, "We've got nothing to hide here. This is a legitimate government transactional business. That's because you weren't actively funding a known genocide at the time." DSEI is organized by the company Clarion Events, but relies on close cooperation from the UK's Ministry of Defence Foreign Office, and Trade Department. But I believe it's also funded like by Turkish billionaires, if I remember correctly. The Excel Center itself is owned by wealthy Turkish billionaires. Defense Secretary John Healey and Military Chief Richard Knighton are due to give keynote speeches at the event. So it's literally the merger of private military contractors owned by a foreign country and the Defense Secretary of the United Kingdom. Sure.
Nice.
There's no separation there. Both men were recently doorstepped by Declassified, meaning that they were chased down the street into whatever building they were in and questioned over their intelligence support for Israel, which might explain DSEI's decision to block access. Yeah, you think? Clarion provided no reason for its refusal because they don't have to, emailing Declassified at 4:30 p.m. yesterday to say, "We regret to inform you that we're unable to accept your registration." That's pretty funny. Declassified had registered back in April and repeatedly chased the organizer, Solomon Hughes, an investigative journalist with Private Eye magazine, was also denied access, by the way. All right. And there's the story about, we've got nothing to hide here. And there's more about this story. All right. So that's another story that Declassified having an impact because they're now being barred and exposing the fact that the people that are asking the hard questions aren't allowed in the building anymore. And then we've got another guy who has gone through so much. And they did an interview earlier this month. Hamza Yousef writes for them and did an interview with Al Jazeera's Wael al-Dahdouh, who you may or may not remember. He lost his son famously to a bombing in Gaza, who they both worked for Al Jazeera. And he basically got his press vest on and went back out like the day after. This was actually during the funeral of his son Hamza. Okay. And we gave both he and Motaz Azaiza an Indie Media Award honor last year because of the amount of times this guy knowingly ran into harm's way to try to tell the story of what's actually happening there. So this was a sit down. He launched a scathing attack on the mainstream media's deficient and biased coverage of Israel's genocide in Gaza. On a visit to London yesterday, organized by Amnesty International, he spoke to Declassified about his experience of reporting from Gaza, where more than 63,000, that's the low number, hundreds of thousands of Palestinians have been killed in the last 2 years. All right. Reflecting on how Western media outlets covered the same events, he said, quote, "They all capitulated to the Israeli narrative and adopted it without challenge, without interrogation, without fact-checking, or a semblance of impartiality. These are our industry colleagues around the world, from news organizations and institutions that we've looked up to and respected throughout our lives. They all pride themselves on being apparent, shining embodiments and benchmarks of journalistic integrity, transparency, truthfulness. That's what we were told all these years. But that very notion, of course, has collapsed completely. They were all proven deficient. We were let down. They saw what's happening to us, the killing, the maiming, the wholesale destruction. This is a campaign of aggression of historic magnitude, a calamity that's befallen more than 2 million besieged people. Journalists were duty-bound to rise to this cause for humanity, and they did not. So there's a little bit more to this article as well. And again, I just wanted to mention that they had an interview, a sit down with him. Again, I encourage everyone to support Declassified UK and to support independent media. And while he was working for Al Jazeera, he still was independent. I mean, he had an outlet to report from, but what did he have? He had a phone and a camera, just like everybody else, while they were running for their lives. And this is one of the few at the Indie Media Awards website where I put a little bit more about who he is and why he's here and why we honor him and the work that he's made, that he's done, and the sacrifice that he's made, and to tell the story. So by all means, and I'll drop a link to this article and to this post for everyone to go check out over at the Indie Media Awards Substack also. But yeah, Declassified UK doing some incredible work. And we need more independent outlets that speak on behalf of Palestine, that platform Palestinians. And I appreciate what John and Matt Kennard was a co-founder of this organization. He's now moved on to do some other stuff. And he's also founded another pro-Palestine Substack outlet, I believe. So man, it's but yeah, the arms, the people in the UK are figuring out who these guys are and what they expose, and they're starting to wake people up, which is great, and I appreciate that. And they, like us, are user funded and don't take corporate money. So if you're able to and have means, just like support the media you want to see, like this show and this network, the ways to do that is using Cash App, $ Indie News Network. We have ko-fi.com/Indie News Network, and that'll pop something up on screen. We've got paypal.me/Indie News Network, and our self-hosted website over at indienewsnow.com. And then over at our Substacks, and I publish the two of them pretty much daily or weekly. IndieMediaToday.com is where we host this show and all the clips and original articles that I publish and write, appearances that I do on other shows, and then and also things that I want to share that I think are important once in a while. And then INNnewsletter.com is where we're going to be live later for boats smashing into other boats. So we live stream there. We host other podcasts, and we publish a weekly update for all of the members of the network and everything that goes out across all of the INN channels.
Go to my website.
And at that website, there's also merch. So there's a button to pick up an INN t-shirt.
Buy my merch right quick.
Oh, check out that merch. Check it out. Oh, Reese wearing a beanie. Look at that. Oh, he's heating up his dab rig right now. So yes, you can get an INN beanie over at the merch store too. You go to indienewsnow.com, click on the merch store, and you can pick up one for yourself. Love you all. Thank you for hanging out. Support independent media because we need it more than ever. We'll see you soon, fam. No! We just fucking lost the stream!
I think I liked it better being blind, when I couldn't read between the lines, and when I couldn't see the cracks in the structure that lay bare before me the whole time. I think I liked it better back when I suspended disbelief and swallowed pride. I thought I knew the difference in the red from the blue, but they both bleed us so dry. They both bleed us so dry.
My favorite songs don't hit the same way. I get to the end of a 4-minute track and I'm only looking back thinking, what did they actually say?
Can't keep giving us nothing and think we're bluffing about coming for your heads. Why play civil if you won't listen to 50,000 dead? And now we know our mission, we form a militia, make Congress a prison.